The morning mist still clung to the mountains as a lone figure walked the quiet streets of Pine Ridge, a German shepherd limping slightly by her side. In her worn Forest Service uniform and scuffed boots, with no makeup and her hair pulled back, in a simple ponytail, she looked nothing like someone who had saved countless lives. But that's exactly who Sergeant Abigail "Abby" Winters was, a decorated K9 handler whose extraordinary courage remained hidden beneath her unassuming appearance, at least until the moment a small-town veterinarian made the grave mistake of judging this book by its cover. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The first hints of dawn painted the Cascade Mountains in hues of purple and gold as Abigail Winters made her way down Main Street in Pine Ridge. The small town was just beginning to stir, shopkeepers unlocking doors and the local diners' lights glowing warm against the cool morning air. Unlike the tourists who would later flood the streets in performance gear that had never seen real wilderness, Abby moved with the quiet confidence of someone who had spent years navigating the harshest terrains nature could offer. She wore no emblems of status, no indication of rank or achievement. Her forest green uniform was clean but worn at the edges, practical rather than ceremonial. Her boots, though polished, bore the scars of countless miles traveled through unforgiving landscapes. To a casual observer, she was just another ranger from the nearby station, perhaps slightly more weathered than most, but otherwise unremarkable. That observer would have been profoundly mistaken, because walking beside Abby, matching her, paced despite a noticeable limp in his right hind leg, was Atlas, a 7-year-old German shepherd whose alert eyes missed nothing. Together, they formed one of the most effective search and rescue teams in the Pacific Northwest, responsible for locating over 60 lost hikers and climbers in conditions that would defeat most humans and animals alike. But this morning, no one would recognize them, because before Abby was a search and rescue specialist, a wilderness first responder, or a K9 handler, she was simply a woman who believed in service without fanfare, and who loved her canine partner with a fierce, unwavering devotion that transcended professional duty. Slung across her shoulder was a well-worn canvas backpack containing Atlas's medical records, a water bottle, and a half-eaten protein bar from yesterday's 12-hour shift. Inside her pocket was a folded referral letter from Dr. Michaels at the ranger station who had examined Atlas the previous evening. "Surgery is beyond my capabilities here," he had said, his weathered face lined with concern as he gently examined Atlas's leg. "The bone fragments need to be removed by a specialist. Dr. Caroline Bennett at Pine Ridge Veterinary Clinic is the best in 3 counties. She trained in orthopedics at Cornell." Abby turned onto Cedar Lane, where the veterinary clinic stood. A modern building of glass and stone that looked more like an upscale medical practice than the rural vet offices she'd grown up with. A modest sign displayed Pine Ridge Veterinary Clinic in elegant script, with Dr. Caroline Bennett DVM below it in smaller letters. But before she could reach the entrance, a distressed sound caught her attention. Beside the clinic's parking lot, a middle-aged woman in a disheveled sweater and worn jeans knelt on the ground, cradling a small terrier mix that was clearly in distress. The dog's breathing was rapid and shallow, its small body trembling uncontrollably. The woman looked up as Abby approached, her face etched with desperation and fear. "Please," she said, her voice breaking, "can you help us? My Rusty ate something." In the park, he just collapsed suddenly and started shaking. "The clinic won't see him without payment up front, and my card was declined." Abby immediately crouched beside them, her trained eyes assessing the dog's condition. Rapid breathing, tremors, excessive drooling, all signs pointing to potential poisoning, not uncommon with mushrooms that grew in the local parks after rainfall. "How long has he been like this?" Abby asked, already slipping off her backpack to retrieve her water bottle. "About 20 minutes. I brought him straight here, but they... Warm." The woman choked back a sob. "The receptionist said they can't treat him without payment. I'm waiting for my sister to call me back. She might be able to help with money." Abby's jaw tightened. In her experience, 20 minutes could mean the difference between life and death in emergency situations. She'd been trained never to let bureaucracy stand in the way of saving lives, human or animal. "Stay with him," Abby said firmly. "Keep him as calm as possible. I'm going inside to talk to them." With Atlas still at her side, Abby strode toward the clinic's entrance, her posture shifting subtly from casual to commanding, a change so instinctive she wasn't even aware of it. The glass doors slid open to reveal a reception area that resembled an upscale spa more than a veterinary practice, marble countertops, designer chairs, and modern art adorning the walls. Behind the reception desk, a young woman with perfectly styled hair was typing on a computer. Her name tag read, Heather. She glanced up as Abby approached, her expression professionally pleasant but dismissive as she took in Abby's ranger uniform and Atlas's working vest. "Good morning. Do you have an appointment?" Heather asked, her gaze already drifting back to her screen. "No, but there's an emergency outside," Abby explained. "A small terrier with what appears to be poisoning symptoms. The owner says she was turned away because of payment issues." Heather's expression hardened slightly. "Yes, Mrs. Reeves. I've already explained our policy. Dr. Bennett requires payment at time of service. We've had too many instances of unpaid bills. Once her family can provide payment information, we'll be happy to see Rusty." Abby felt a flicker of anger, but kept her voice steady. "The dog may not have that kind of time. Isn't there some kind of emergency protocol?" "I understand your concern," Heather replied, though her tone suggested otherwise. "But Dr. Bennett is very clear about this policy. Perhaps they could try the county animal hospital. It's about 40 minutes from here. 40 minutes that Rusty likely didn't have." Abby had seen what toxins could do to an animal system in far less time than that. "I'd like to speak with Dr. Bennett directly," Abby stated, her voice taking on the calm authority she used during rescue operations. "She's preparing for surgery and can't be disturbed," Heather replied, a note of finality in her voice. "Now, if you're here about your own dog, I'd be happy to schedule an appointment. Otherwise—" "I have an appointment," Abby interrupted. "Dr. Michaels from the ranger station referred us. Atlas needs orthopedic surgery for bone fragments in his hind leg." This caught Heather's attention. She opened a scheduling program on her computer. "Winters, at 9:30. That's not for another hour. We arrived early because of road construction," Abby explained, the small lie necessary in her mind, given the circumstances. "But since we're here, I'd like Dr. Bennett to take a look at the emergency case outside first. Atlas can wait." Heather frowned, clearly caught between protocol and the authority in Abby's voice. "Let me check with Dr. Bennett's assistant," she finally conceded, picking up the phone. While Heather spoke in hushed tones, Abby glanced around the waiting room. Despite the early hour, several people already occupied the plush chairs, most with carriers or leashed pets beside them. A man in an expensive suit checked his watch impatiently, while his Doberman sat perfectly still at his feet. An elderly woman gently stroked a Persian cat in a monogrammed carrier. Everyone looked comfortable in these surroundings. Everyone. Except Abby and Atlas. Heather replaced the phone and offered a tight smile. "Dr. Bennett's assistant says they need to maintain the schedule. If you'd like to wait for your appointment, you're welcome to have a seat. We have complimentary coffee and water." Abby remained standing. "And what about the emergency outside? As I explained to Mrs. Reeves, once payment is arranged—" "I'll cover it," Abby interrupted, pulling out her own credit card. It would strain her already tight budget, but she couldn't stand by while an animal suffered unnecessarily. "Whatever the emergency fee is," Heather seemed taken aback. That's not necessary. Mrs. Reeves needs to... She needs her dog treated, Abby cut in. And I'm offering to pay. Is there a problem with that? The receptionist hesitated, then reluctantly took the card. I'll need you to fill out some paperwork as the financially responsible party. Fine, Abby agreed, already turning toward the door. I'll bring Mrs. Reeves and Rusty in while you get that ready. Minutes later, Mrs. Reeves sat in the waiting room, Rusty trembling in her arms while Abby completed the necessary forms. The woman's gratitude was palpable, her eyes brimming with tears as she watched a veterinary technician emerge to assess Rusty's condition. I don't know how to thank you, Mrs. Reeves whispered to Abby. I get paid tomorrow. I can meet you somewhere to repay you. Don't worry about that now, Abby assured her. Just focus on Rusty. The technical quickly recognized the severity of Rusty's condition and rushed him to an examination room, with Mrs. Reeves following close behind. Abby returned to her seat beside Atlas, who rested his head on her knee, his intelligent eyes watching her face as if sensing her mixed emotions. It's okay, boy, she murmured, scratching behind his ears. We'll get you taken care of too. Nearly 40 minutes passed before a door opened and a tall woman in surgical scrubs emerged. Dr. Caroline Bennett had the confident bearing of someone accustomed to authority, her posture impeccable, her movements precise, her expression calmly professional. She conferred briefly with a technician before approaching the reception desk, where she reviewed several charts. Abby watched as Heather leaned forward and whispered something to Dr. Bennett, gesturing subtly toward where she sat with Atlas. The veterinarian glanced over, her gaze clinical and assessing as it moved from Abby to Atlas and back again. Without acknowledgement, she returned to her conversation with the receptionist. A few moments later, Mrs. Reeves emerged from the examination room, her expression transformed by relief. She immediately made her way to Abby. They've stabilized him, she said, her voice thick with emotion. It was some kind of mushroom toxin, just like you thought. Dr. Bennett says if we'd waited even another 20 minutes... She couldn't finish the sentence. They're keeping him for observation and treatment, but they expect him to recover fully. That's wonderful news, Abby replied, genuinely relieved. They told me you covered the emergency fee, Mrs. Reeves continued. It was over $300. I promise I'll pay you back. We can figure that out later, Abby assured her. I'm just glad Rusty is getting the care he needs. As Mrs. Reeves left with the receptionist to complete discharge paperwork, a veterinary assistant appeared in the doorway. Ms. Winters, we're ready for Atlas now. Abby nodded, standing and patting her thigh as a signal for Atlas to follow. Despite his injured leg, he moved with the disciplined grace of a working dog, staying precisely at her left side as they followed the assistant down a hallway lined with examination rooms. They were led to a room at the end of the corridor, larger than the others and equipped with specialized orthopedic equipment. The assistant gestured for Abby to help Atlas onto the examination table. Dr. Bennett will be with you shortly, she said before departing and closing the door behind her. Alone in the room, Abby gently ran her hands over Atlas's injured leg, feeling the slight swelling around the joint. Almost there, partner, she murmured. We'll get you fixed up and back to work in no time. Atlas licked her hand once, his warm brown eyes fixed on her face with complete trust. That trust was the cornerstone of their relationship, both professionally and personally. Through blizzards, forest fires, and treacherous mountain rescues, they had learned to rely on each other with absolute confidence. Remember that climber on Mount Rainier last winter, she said softly, maintaining the gentle banter she often used to keep Atlas calm during medical examinations. The one everyone else had given up on? 7 days missing in sub-zero temperatures, and you still found him. She smiled at the memory. Colonel Phillips said it was impossible. Showed him. Didn't we? The door opened and Dr. Caroline Bennett entered, her attention on the tablet in her hands rather than on her patients. Without looking up, she began speaking. "I understand you're here about a leg injury," she said, her tone businesslike but not unfriendly. "The notes from Dr. Michaels indicate bone fragments in the right hind leg, presumably from some kind of trauma." "Yes," Abby replied. "We were involved in a rock slide during a rescue operation 3 weeks ago. Atlas got caught in it while locating a lost hiker." Dr. Bennett finally looked up, her expression neutral as she registered Abby's Ranger uniform. "I see, and the initial x-rays are where?" "Dr. Michaels sent them electronically yesterday, along with a referral letter," Abby explained. "He said this is beyond what he can handle at the ranger station. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story." Dr. Bennett set down her tablet and moved to examine Atlas, her hands professionally gentle as she palpated the injured leg. Atlas remained perfectly still, his training evident in his composure. "He's very well behaved for a pet," Dr. Bennett observed, reaching for an otoscope to check Atlas's ears and eyes. "He's not a pet," Abby corrected. "He's a certified search and rescue dog with the Forest Service K9 unit." This information seemed to have little impact on Dr. Bennett, who continued her examination methodically. "The injury doesn't seem to be affecting his overall health, which is good. However, I'll need to take my own x-rays before determining the appropriate surgical approach." She stepped back, making notes on her tablet. "My receptionist will provide you with an estimate for the diagnostic work and potential surgery. Given the specialized nature of the procedure, you should be prepared for significant costs. Does the Forest Service cover these expenses, or will this be a personal payment?" The question carried an unmistakable undertone that set Abby's teeth on edge. Before she could respond, Dr. Bennett's tablet chimed with a notification. "Excuse me," the veterinarian said, frowning at the screen. "It seems Dr. Michaels finally sent over those records." She swiped through several images, her expression shifting subtly as she examined them. "These x-rays are quite comprehensive." He even included contrast imaging. "Dr. Michaels is very thorough," Abby noted. "He's been caring for the K9 unit for years." Dr. Bennett continued reviewing the records, her frown deepening. "This is an unusual amount of detail for a referral," she murmured, almost to herself. When she looked up again, her gaze was sharper, more focused on Abby. "These records mention multiple prior injuries: a punctured lung 2 years ago, bite wounds from a mountain lion attack, hypothermia treatment." Her tone suggested skepticism. "That seems excessive for a park ranger's companion." "As I mentioned, Atlas is a search and rescue dog," Abby replied evenly. "We operate in extreme conditions when necessary." "I see," Dr. Bennett said, though her expression suggested otherwise. She turned her attention back to Atlas, running expert hands along his spine and checking the mobility of his uninjured limbs. "Despite his history, his overall condition is excellent. You've clearly taken good care of him." There was a slight warming in her tone, the first sign of genuine approval since she'd entered the room. Abby felt some of her tension ease. "Thank you. He's my partner in every sense of the word." Dr. Bennett nodded, her focus returning to the tablet as she swiped through more documents. Suddenly she paused, her finger hovering over the screen. "Wait, this can't be right." She scrolled back, reading more carefully. "These service records indicate that you and Atlas were deployed to the Cascade Complex fires last summer?" "Yes," Abby confirmed. "We were there for 6 weeks, primarily doing search operations for hikers trapped by the fire lines." Dr. Bennett's expression changed subtly, the professional distance giving way to something more engaged. "The evacuation of Elk Ridge Valley? That was your unit?" Atlas and I were part of that operation, yes. The veterinarian set down her tablet, her attention now fully on Abby rather than her notes. My parents live in Elk Ridge Valley. They refused to evacuate until the last minute. My father has emphysema. He can barely walk to the mailbox without his oxygen. When the evacuation order came, their car wouldn't start. Abby felt a chill of recognition. During large-scale operations like Elk Ridge, individual rescues blended together in memory, but some stood out. A couple in their 70s? She asked quietly. Blue house with white trim, about a mile from the community center. Dr. Bennett's eyes widened. Yes. How did you... Your father insisted on bringing his oxygen concentrator, even though it weighed almost 40 pounds. Abby continued, the memory crystallizing. And your mother wouldn't leave without her ginger cat, but it had hidden somewhere in the house. Marmalade, Dr. Bennett whispered. They said a female ranger and her dog found the cat hiding in the ventilation duct. Abby nodded. Atlas tracked his scent. We were running out of time. The fire was less than 2 miles away and moving fast with the wind shift. Dr. Bennett stared at Abby, seeing her truly for the first time. You carried my father's oxygen equipment a half-mile to the evacuation point, in 100-degree heat with ash falling like snow. That's our job, Abby said simply. My parents said they never got your name. Everything was so chaotic. Sergeant Abigail Winters, she replied, but everyone calls me Abby. Dr. Bennett looked down at Atlas, then back to Abby, her professional demeanor completely transformed. You saved my parents' lives. Both of you did. She reached out and gently placed her hand on Atlas's head. And now you're here because he was injured saving someone else. Dr. Caroline Bennett stood motionless, her composed professional demeanor completely transformed. The realization that the unassuming ranger before her had saved her parents' lives during the catastrophic Cascade Complex fires created a profound shift in perspective. She looked at Atlas with new eyes, not as simply another patient, but as a heroic partner who had risked everything alongside his handler. I need to apologize, Dr. Bennett said, her voice softer than before. I pride myself on treating every patient with equal care, but I've been dismissive, particularly about the emergency case outside. Abby maintained her steady gaze. The terrier is receiving treatment now. That's what matters. No, it's not all that matters, Dr. Bennett countered. The way we treat people matters too. My receptionist informed me that you offered to pay for that dog's emergency treatment yourself. It seemed like the right thing to do, Abby replied simply. Dr. Bennett shook her head, a complex mix of emotions crossing her face. My parents described the ranger who saved them as an angel who refused to give up. They said even when the helicopter couldn't land because of the smoke, you found another way. She paused. They never mentioned your name, but they described Atlas. Hard to forget a German shepherd who can locate a terrified cat in a burning house. Abby rested her hand on Atlas's back, drawing comfort from his solid presence. We had excellent training and a lot of luck that day. The wind shifted at just the right moment to clear the landing zone. That wasn't luck, Dr. Bennett said firmly. My father told me how you positioned everyone on that ridge, how you calculated where the smoke would thin based on the wind. Patterns. He said you stayed until every civilian was evacuated, even though you were coughing so hard from smoke inhalation you could barely speak. The memory of that day returned to Abby in vivid detail. The scorching heat, the roar of approaching flames, the weight of Mr. Bennett's oxygen equipment digging into her shoulders as she navigated the treacherous terrain. Atlas had led the way, his training allowing him to find the safest path, even as visibility dropped to near zero. Your parents were incredibly brave, Abby said. Your father kept everyone's spirits up with jokes, even though he must have been terrified. And your mother helped that young mother with twins stay calm when one of the babies wouldn't stop crying. Dr. Bennett's eyes widened. You remember all that, after so many rescues? Abby nodded. Every rescue stays with us, in different ways. A respectful silence fell between them. Dr. Bennett moved closer to Atlas, her clinical assessment now, mixed with genuine reverence as she gently examined his injured leg again. The damage is significant, she said, her tone shifting back to professional expertise, though now warmed with compassion. But repairable. The bone fragments have caused some inflammation around the joint, but there's minimal damage to the surrounding ligaments, which is fortunate. She straightened up, making notes on her tablet. I want to perform the surgery myself, today if possible. We'll need to reschedule some appointments, but this takes priority. Before Abby could respond, a knock sounded at the door, and the receptionist, Heather, entered with a folder in hand. I have the estimate for Ms. Winters, she said, handing the document to Dr. Bennett. The veterinarian glanced at the paperwork, then looked back at Abby. This won't be necessary, she said, returning the folder to Heather. Atlas's procedure will be covered under our service animal program. Heather looked confused. But we don't have a service animal. We do now, Dr. Bennett interrupted, firmly. Please inform Dr. Reynolds that I'll need the surgical suite at 11 instead of 2, and call my next 3 appointments to reschedule. The receptionist hesitated, clearly unused to this departure from protocol, but nodded and left the room. You don't have to do that, Abby said once they were alone again. The Forest Service has a medical fund for the K9 unit. It's limited, but this isn't charity, Sergeant Winters, Dr. Bennett interrupted. This clinic has always claimed to serve the community, but we've lost sight of what that really means. Turning away animals in distress because of payment. Issues. That's not why I became a veterinarian. She shook her head. My parents raised me better than that. She moved to a cabinet and removed several vials and a syringe. I'm going to give Atlas a mild sedative to help him relax before surgery. The procedure itself will take about 2 hours, and he'll need to stay overnight for observation. As Dr. Bennett prepared the injection, her movements precise and gentle, she continued speaking. After my parents were evacuated, my father had a severe respiratory episode from smoke exposure. The doctors said if he'd stayed in that valley even 30 minutes longer, he wouldn't have survived. She administered the injection with expert care, then stroked Atlas's head softly. When my parents described the ranger and her dog who saved them, I imagined someone different. More impressive looking? Abby suggested with a hint of dry humor. Dr. Bennett had the grace to look embarrassed. More like the heroic types they show on the news, dramatic rescues with helicopters and spotlights. Those happen too, Abby acknowledged, but most of our work is quiet, methodical, and decidedly unglamorous, reading terrain, tracking signs that most people would miss, making difficult decisions with limited information. As the sedative began to take effect, Atlas leaned against Abby, his eyelids growing heavy. She supported his weight easily, murmuring reassurances. He trusts you completely, Dr. Bennett observed. The feeling is mutual, Abby replied. There have been times when following his lead saved my life, even when it contradicted what I thought was right. That kind of partnership takes years to build. Dr. Bennett nodded thoughtfully. I can see that now. She checked Atlas's vitals, satisfied with his response to the medication. I need to prepare for the surgery, but I'd like to talk more afterward. Would that be all right? Of course, Abby agreed. The surgical waiting area is through the blue door at the end of the hall. There's coffee and a comfortable place to rest. This has been a difficult morning for both of you. As 2 veterinary technicians arrived to transport Atlas to the surgical suite, Abby leaned down to press her forehead gently against his. I'll be right here when you wake up, partner, she promised softly. Atlas's tail thumped once against the examination table. A gesture of absolute faith. Dr. Bennett watched this exchange with new understanding. "We'll take excellent care of him," she assured Abby. "You have my word." As Atlas was carefully moved onto a gurney, Abby felt the familiar tightness in her chest that came whenever they were separated. Despite years of dangerous deployments and countless medical procedures resulting from their work, the moment of letting him go never became easier. The waiting area was empty when Abby entered, offering blessed solitude after the emotional intensity of the morning. She sank into a comfortable chair and finally allowed herself to feel the fatigue that had been building since their pre-dawn. Wake-up call. They had spent the previous day conducting training exercises with newer K9 teams, Atlas pushing through his discomfort to demonstrate proper search patterns despite his injury. Abby pulled out her phone to update Commander Richards about Atlas's surgery. As she composed the message, she noticed several missed calls from the ranger station. Before she could return them, the waiting room door opened. A tall, broad-shouldered man in his 60s entered, his silver hair cropped short in a military style that complemented his imposing presence. Despite his age, Colonel James Phillips moved with the purposeful efficiency of someone half his years, his keen eyes taking in every detail of the room before settling on Abby. She immediately stood, surprise evident in her expression. "Colonel, what are you doing here?" "Tracking down my best team," he replied, his gruff voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to command. "When Richard said you'd taken Atlas to Pine Ridge instead of the military veterinary unit at Fort Harrison, I was concerned." "Dr. Michaels referred us here," Abby explained. "Dr. Bennett has specialized orthopedic training that he thought would be beneficial." Colonel Phillips nodded, accepting this reasoning. "How's our boy doing?" "In surgery now. The prognosis is good. Bone fragments in the joint, but minimal ligament damage." "Recovery time?" 4 to 6 weeks, according to Dr. Michaels." The colonel frowned. "That's not ideal, given the circumstances." "What circumstances?" Abby asked, immediately alert to the shift in his tone. Colonel Phillips glanced around the waiting room, confirming they were alone before continuing. "The governor called an emergency meeting this morning. 3 hikers went missing yesterday in the North Cascade Wilderness area. Search teams found their abandoned campsite at dawn, but no sign of the hikers themselves." Abby felt a familiar surge of adrenaline. "Bear activity? Possible. But there's another factor." He lowered his voice. "These aren't ordinary hikers. Winters, one of them, is Senator Morrison's daughter." The implications were immediately clear. Senator Morrison chaired the committee that oversaw funding for wilderness management and search and rescue operations throughout the state. His influence extended to federal appropriations for the Forest Service itself. "The other teams are already deployed?" Abby asked, her mind shifting into operational mode despite her concern for Atlas. "Richards dispatched them at first light, but they're having trouble establishing a search perimeter. The area experienced heavy rainfall last night, washing away most trackable evidence." He fixed Abby with a significant look. "You know what that means." She did. Conventional search methods relied heavily on visible signs like footprints, disturbed vegetation, or personal items. When those were compromised by weather conditions, scent tracking became exponentially more important, and no K9 team in the region matched Atlas's tracking abilities in compromised conditions. "Sir, Atlas is in surgery," Abby said firmly. "Even if everything goes perfectly, he won't be field ready for at least a month." Colonel Phillips nodded gravely. "I understand that, but given the high-profile nature of this situation, I need my best handler on site, even without her K9 partner. Your expertise in wilderness terrain assessment and tracking is unmatched, Winters. You can provide critical support to the teams already deployed." Before Abby could respond, the door opened again, and Dr. Bennett entered, still wearing her surgical scrubs. Her expression was serious, but not grim, a look Abby had learned to recognize from medical professionals as cautiously positive. "The surgery is underway," Dr. Bennett announced. "We've successfully removed 2 bone fragments, and there's less inflammation than we initially feared." She paused, noticing Colonel Phillips. "I'm sorry. I didn't realize you had company." "Dr. Bennett, this is Colonel James Phillips, commander of the Regional Search and Rescue Division," Abby introduced them. "Colonel Dr. Caroline Bennett." Recognition flickered in Dr. Bennett's eyes. "Colonel Phillips, my parents mentioned you as well. You coordinated the Elk Ridge evacuation from the command center." The colonel's stern expression softened slightly. "Bennett, Robert and Martha Bennett, the couple with the cat." "Yes, sir. They're my parents. Remarkable people. Your father kept the entire evacuation group in good spirits, despite dire circumstances." A rare smile briefly crossed his face. "And your mother's cat was possibly the most elusive feline I've encountered in 40 years of service." Dr. Bennett returned the smile. Marmalade has always had a talent for hiding at the worst possible moments. The momentary lightness faded as Colonel Phillips turned back to Abby. "Dr. Bennett, how long will the surgery take to complete?" "Another hour, approximately. Then Atlas will need several hours in recovery before he's conscious enough to be transported." "And when could he potentially return to modified duty?" Dr. Bennett frowned. "Modified duty? Colonel, we're talking about major orthopedic surgery. Atlas will need complete rest for at least 2 weeks, followed by gradual rehabilitation." "I understand," the colonel replied, his tone respectful but insistent. "However, we are facing an emergency situation with lives at stake." He glanced at Abby. "I wouldn't ask if there were any alternative." Abby felt torn between her responsibility to Atlas and her duty to the missing hikers. She had trained her entire career to make difficult decisions under pressure, but this one struck at her core. The well-being of her partner balanced against the lives of 3 missing people, one of whom could potentially impact the future of search and rescue operations throughout the state. "What exactly are you asking?" Dr. Bennett inquired, her professional demeanor returning. "I need Sergeant Winters on site at the North Cascade search area as soon as possible," Colonel Phillips explained, "and I need to know when Atlas could potentially provide limited support, not physical tracking, but perhaps scent identification from base camp." Dr. Bennett considered this carefully. From a medical perspective, Atlas should remain under observation for at least 24 hours post-surgery. After that, assuming no complications, he could be transported in a carefully controlled environment. Limited activity, and I mean extremely limited, might be possible after 72 hours, but nothing strenuous. Colonel Phillips nodded, turning to Abby. "That gives us parameters to work with. The helicopter is waiting at the municipal airfield. We can have you on site within the hour, while Atlas recovers here under Dr. Bennett's care." The thought of leaving Atlas during his recovery went against every instinct Abby had developed during their years together. They had never been separated during a medical situation, not when she was injured during a mountain rescue 2 years ago, and not when Atlas suffered a punctured lung after a fall into a ravine. The bond between handler and working dog transcended typical pet relationships. It was a partnership built on absolute mutual dependence and trust. "He won't understand why I'm not there when he wakes up," Abby said quietly. Dr. Bennett stepped forward. "If I may make a suggestion, the surgery will take another hour, and Atlas won't fully emerge from anesthesia for several hours after that. You could record a message for him, something with your voice and scent that my staff could play when he begins to regain consciousness. Studies show this can significantly reduce post-operative stress in working dogs separated from their handlers. It wasn't ideal, but it offered some compromise. Abby thought of the 3 missing hikers, potentially injured or disoriented in the wilderness. Every hour decreased their chances of survival. I'll need 30 minutes to record something for Atlas and gather my field equipment from the ranger station, she decided, and I want hourly updates on his condition. Done, Colonel Phillips agreed. I'll have Richards arrange for video conferences whenever possible. Dr. Bennett added, I'll oversee his care personally, Sergeant Winters, and I promise to contact you immediately if there's any change in his condition, no matter how minor. The decision made, Abby felt the familiar mental shift that accompanied deployment, personal concerns receding as operational priorities took precedence. It was never easy, but it was necessary. One more thing, Dr. Bennett said, reaching into her pocket and extracting a small object. This was embedded near one of the bone fragments. Perhaps you recognize it? She handed Abby a small, jagged piece of stone with unusual dark striations. Abby examined it closely, recognition dawning. Black schist, she identified. It's a metamorphic rock found primarily in the eastern slope of Craggy Peak. She looked up at Colonel Phillips. This confirms that Atlas's injury occurred during the rock slide on the Marston rescue. The colonel nodded grimly. The same rescue where Atlas located the hiker 30 minutes before the second slide would have buried him completely. Dr. Bennett stared at the stone fragment with new understanding. He was already injured when he found that hiker. That's what we suspect, Abby confirmed. He showed no signs of distress until after we returned to base camp. Dr. Michaels believes he was running on pure adrenaline. Colonel Phillips added, that's why the injury appears to have worsened over time. He continued working despite the initial trauma. Dr. Bennett carefully took the rock fragment back, placing it in a specimen container. I'll make sure this is properly documented in his medical record. Her expression had grown solemn. The more I learn about your work, the more extraordinary it seems. It's not extraordinary to us, Abby replied. It's simply the job we've committed to do. As they prepared to leave the clinic, Mrs. Reeves approached from the reception area, her eyes still red from crying, but her expression transformed by relief. Sergeant Winters, she called, Dr. Bennett just told me that Rusty is stabilized and responding well to treatment. She clutched Abby's hands in hers, and she said, you're the one I should thank, not just for paying the emergency fee, but for insisting he receive treatment. Anyone would have done the same, Abby responded, uncomfortable with the gratitude. No, Mrs. Reeves said firmly, they wouldn't. Believe me, I tried several people before you arrived. She pressed a small, worn business card into Abby's hand. I clean houses in the area. Please, let me repay your kindness with my services. Before Abby could decline, Colonel Phillips intervened smoothly. Mrs. Reeves, I'm Colonel Phillips with the Forest Service. Sergeant Winters is being deployed immediately for an emergency operation, but I'm certain she would appreciate your services once she returns. Perhaps you could coordinate with Dr. Bennett? The diplomatic solution satisfied Mrs. Reeves, who nodded enthusiastically before returning to the treatment area where Rusty was recovering. You've made quite an impression in a short time, Colonel Phillips observed as they exited the clinic. Not surprising, but noteworthy nonetheless. Abby glanced back at the building where Atlas was undergoing surgery. It all started with a mistaken judgment, she said quietly. Dr. Bennett saw a disheveled ranger and an injured dog, not a search and rescue team. People see what they expect to see, the colonel replied philosophically. It's the exceptional ones who learn to look deeper. He checked his watch. 30 minutes to gather your equipment and record a message for Atlas. I'll meet you at the airfield. As Abby walked toward her vehicle, she felt the weight of dual responsibilities. To her partner in surgery, and to the missing hikers. Awaiting rescue, the path ahead would require all her skills and experience, made more challenging by Atlas's absence from her side. But if their years of service had taught her anything, it was that the most important quality in any rescue operation wasn't technical skill or physical strength. It was heart, the unwavering commitment to find those who were lost, to protect those who were vulnerable, and to never, ever give up until the mission was complete. The military helicopter cut through the morning sky, its rhythmic thrum drowning out Abby's thoughts as she stared at the rapidly shrinking town of Pine Ridge below. In her 20 years of service, she had been deployed on countless rescue operations, but never without Atlas by her side. The absence of his solid warmth, pressed against her leg, left a physical void that matched the hollow feeling in her chest. Colonel Phillips sat across from her, reviewing topographical maps on his tablet while coordinating with ground teams via radio. He occasionally glanced at Abby, understanding the emotional toll of her separation from Atlas better than most. As former handler to 3 successive search and rescue dogs during his field career, he recognized the unique bond that formed between working dogs and their partners. Richards reports the ground teams have established a base camp at the eastern trailhead, he said, raising his voice above the helicopter noise. The missing hiker's vehicle was found in the overnight parking area. Trail register shows they planned a 3-day loop through Cascade Valley. Abby nodded, mentally calculating possible scenarios. When did the rain begin in that sector? Approximately 2100 hours yesterday, continued until 0400 this morning. That's going to complicate things, Abby noted. Scent particles will have been washed deeper into the soil layer. The dogs will need to work much closer to the ground, which slows progress considerably. Colonel Phillips handed her a tablet displaying 3 photographs. The missing hikers, Melissa Morrison, 22, Senator Morrison's daughter, pre-med student at Washington State; Ryan Teller, 23, her boyfriend, geology major; and Kai Zhang, 22, Melissa's roommate, studying environmental science. Abby studied the images carefully, noting details that might be relevant during the search. All 3 young adults appeared fit and athletic, dressed in quality outdoor gear. Experienced hikers, most likely, not novices who had wandered unprepared into wilderness conditions. "Any pre-existing medical conditions?" she asked. None reported. All 3 are experienced backpackers with wilderness first aid certification. They had appropriate gear for the conditions and left a detailed itinerary with the park ranger. This information shifted Abby's assessment significantly. Missing hikers typically fell into predictable categories: inexperienced adventurers who underestimated the wilderness, thrill seekers who deliberately went off trail, or experienced outdoors people caught by unexpected circumstances like injuries or severe weather changes. "This doesn't sound like a typical situation where hikers got lost," Abby observed. "With their experience and preparation, they should have been able to handle most emergencies, or at least stay together." Colonel Phillips nodded grimly. "That's what concerns me. The abandoned campsite was found in good order, no signs of panic or hasty departure. But 3 experienced hikers don't simply vanish without reason." "What was found at the campsite?" Abby asked, shifting into the analytical mindset that had made her one of the most effective trackers in the service. 3 high-end backpacks, with sleeping bags still inside them. Cooking equipment partially cleaned after what appears to be their evening meal. Personal items including cell phones, no service in that area, of course. Morrison's journal with entries up through yesterday afternoon." He paused. "One unusual element. Teller's geology equipment was found scattered near his tent, including several rock samples labeled with locations and dates." Abby filed this information away, knowing seemingly insignificant details often proved crucial during searches. "And the search perimeter?" 5-mile radius from the campsite initially, focusing on established trails and natural water sources. 2 K9 teams working the northern sector, one on the southern approach. Technical climbers checking the eastern ridge, where there's a significant drop-off. The helicopter began its descent toward a small clearing where emergency vehicles and tents indicated the command center. As they approached, Abby could see teams of searchers in bright orange vests preparing to deploy. K9 handlers checking their dogs' equipment and communications officers establishing satellite connections. "You'll be coordinating from base camp," Colonel Phillips informed her as they touched down. "Your experience with terrain assessment and search patterns will help us maximize efficiency, especially given the weather complications." Abby felt a momentary pang of frustration at being assigned to base camp rather than field operations, but she understood the reasoning. Without Atlas, her most valuable contribution would be strategic rather than tactical, using her expertise to direct the teams rather than conducting searches herself. As they exited the helicopter, the base camp's coordinator approached. A tall woman with silver-streaked dark hair pulled back in a practical braid. Captain Maria Delgado had worked with Abby on numerous operations over the years and was one of the few people who truly understood the exceptional nature of Abby and Atlas's partnership. "Sergeant Winters," she greeted, her expression conveying both professional respect and personal concern. "I heard about Atlas. How is he?" "In surgery now," Abby replied. "Dr. Bennett says the prognosis is good." Captain Delgado nodded, then turned to business with the efficiency of someone who knew that focus on the mission was the best comfort she could offer. "We've had teams in the field since 600. No sign of the missing hikers yet, but we've identified several areas of interest based on the terrain and their likely route." She led them to the command tent, where a large tactical map was spread across a central table marked with colored pins indicating search zones, team positions, and points of interest. "The abandoned campsite is here," she indicated, pointing to a red marker. "It's located in a small clearing about 50 yards from Crystal Creek. According to their registered itinerary, they plan to head northwest the next morning toward Evergreen Pass, then loop back along the ridge trail." Abby studied the map, her trained eye immediately identifying the challenges of the terrain. The northwest route would have taken the hikers through increasingly rugged country, with several stream crossings that could become dangerous after heavy rainfall. "Have the water levels been checked at these crossing points?" she asked, indicating several locations where the trail intersected with streams. "Yes," Captain Delgado confirmed. 2 are significantly higher than normal, but still passable. "The third crossing here," she pointed to a location about 3 miles from the campsite, "has become impassable due to the rainfall. At least a Class 3 rapid now, where it's normally a gentle flow. That would force them to either turn back or find an alternate route," Abby noted. "What's the terrain like off-trail in this sector?" Colonel Phillips zoomed in on the topographical features of the area. Dense forest with moderate undergrowth, multiple ravines, some with drops of 30 to 50 feet. There's an old logging road that runs parallel to the creek for about a mile before veering east. Abby traced the contour lines with her finger, reading the landscape story through the map's symbology. If they attempted to circumvent the crossing by heading east toward the logging road, they'd encounter this series of small ravines. In the dark, especially after heavy rainfall making the ground unstable. She didn't need to finish the thought. Everyone present understood the implications. A fall into a ravine could result in injuries that would prevent self-rescue, especially in an area with no cell service and limited visibility from the air due to the dense forest canopy. "We need to redirect Team 2 to this sector," Abby decided, indicating an area approximately 2 miles east of the impassable crossing. If they were attempting to navigate around the high water in darkness, this is the most likely area for an accident. Captain Delgado nodded in agreement. "I'll radio Martinez and redirect his team." She hesitated, then added, "They have Ranger with them. Good tracking dog, but not in Atlas's league when it comes to difficult scent conditions. Ça se dit, de. No one is," Colonel Phillips acknowledged. "But Ranger trained with Atlas last summer. He's absorbed some of those techniques." As the search operation reorganized based on Abby's assessment, her phone vibrated with an incoming message. Her heart raced when she saw it was from Dr. Bennett. "Atlas is out of surgery. Procedure went smoothly. He's in recovery now and showing good vital signs. We'll send video once he's more alert." Relief flooded through her, temporarily easing the tension that had been building since their separation. She quickly typed a response. "Thank you. Please play the recording when he starts to wake up. It might help keep him calm." Before leaving Pine Ridge, she had recorded a 2-minute message for Atlas, speaking in the calm, reassuring tone she used during their most challenging deployments. The recording included specific commands that would help him understand he needed to rest and heal. Easy, stay, and wait, words that were part of their working language and would provide familiar structure during his disoriented recovery from anesthesia. Captain Delgado glanced at Abby's phone. "Good news about Atlas?" "Yes," Abby confirmed. "Surgery went well." "He's a fighter," Delgado said with conviction. "I remember when you two found those lost climbers on Mount Baker in that blizzard 3 years ago. If any dog can bounce back from surgery, it's Atlas." The memory brought a faint smile to Abby's face. That rescue had tested their partnership to its limits: 0 visibility, temperatures well below freezing, and treacherous ice conditions that had already claimed one climber's life before they arrived. Atlas had tracked scent particles carried on swirling winds, leading them to the stranded climbers huddled in a makeshift snow cave less than an hour before hypothermia would have claimed them. "Team 2 is moving to the new search area," Colonel Phillips announced, returning from the communication station. "ETA 20 minutes. Team 3 reports completing their sweep of the Southern Trail with no signs of the missing hikers." Abby returned her focus to the map, calculating how the teams should proceed for maximum efficiency. Once Team 2 reaches the ravine area, they should work in a modified grid pattern, with the K9 taking the lead at each potential access point to the lower ground. She indicated several locations where the terrain created natural pathways down to the ravine floor. These are the most likely routes someone would take if they were trying to navigate in poor conditions. They're also the most dangerous, loose soil on steep grades, especially after rainfall. As she explained her reasoning, the search coordinators nodded in understanding. Abby's ability to read terrain and predict human behavior in wilderness settings was legendary among search and rescue professionals. It wasn't just technical knowledge, it was an intuitive understanding of how people responded to environmental challenges when under stress. "There's something else we should consider," Abby added, pointing to the notation about the scattered geology equipment at the campsite. "Ryan Teller is a geology student. The presence of labeled rock samples suggests he was conducting some kind of fieldwork during their hike." "How does that factor into the search?" asked Captain Delgado. "It might explain why they left their campsite, despite having proper equipment and experience," Abby theorized. "If Teller discovered something of geological interest, an unusual formation, mineral deposit or fossil, he might have convinced the others to explore it, even if it meant deviating from their planned route." Colonel Phillips considered this. That would explain the undisturbed campsite. Not an emergency departure, but a deliberate excursion they expected to return from. "Exactly," Abby confirmed. "And if that's the case, we need to expand our thinking beyond the obvious routes. Geological features of interest might be off-trail, rock outcroppings, cliff faces, cave systems." She turned to a geological survey, map overlay, scanning for features that might attract a geology student's attention. "There," she said, indicating a formation about a mile east of the campsite. "Those striations indicate possible exposed metamorphic rock layers. If Teller noticed evidence of this from samples collected earlier in their hike, he might have been eager to investigate despite the weather." This insight shifted the search parameters significantly. Captain Delgado immediately contacted Team 3 to redirect them toward the geological formation, while Abby continued analyzing potential scenarios based on the new theory. As the afternoon progressed, Abby remained at the command center, coordinating team movements and analyzing incoming data from the field. Every hour, as promised, Dr. Bennett sent updates on Atlas's condition, each one offering reassurance that his recovery was proceeding normally. By late afternoon, the first video arrived, showing Atlas in his recovery kennel, groggy but alert enough to raise his head when he heard Abby's recorded voice playing near him. The sight of his ears perking up at the sound of her commands brought a lump to Abby's throat. Even sedated and disoriented, Atlas responded to their bond, his training so deeply ingrained that it transcended his physical discomfort. "He's doing remarkably well," Dr. Bennett's voice explained in the video. "His vitals are strong, and he's already showing appropriate responses to stimuli. The surgical site looks clean with no signs of excessive swelling." The video continued with Dr. Bennett gently examining Atlas's operated leg, demonstrating the range of motion they had restored. Once the initial healing period is complete, he should regain full functionality. His conditioning prior to the injury is a significant advantage. His muscle tone and overall health are exceptional. Watching the careful, respectful way Dr. Bennett handled Atlas reinforced Abby's growing appreciation for the veterinarian. The dismissive clinic director from their first encounter had been replaced by a dedicated professional who clearly understood the value of their partnership. "Winters," Colonel Phillips called, interrupting her thoughts. "Team 2 has found something." Abby quickly pocketed her phone and joined him at the communication station, where the radio crackled with an incoming transmission. "Base camp, this is Martinez. We've located what appears to be a recent rockslide, approximately half a mile east of the ravine area. Ranger is showing interest in the debris field, but hasn't given a definitive alert." Abby took the radio. "Martinez, this is Winters. What's the scale of the slide?" "Moderate size. Originated from an exposed cliff face about 60 feet up. Debris field is approximately 30 yards wide. No visual confirmation of the subjects, but Ranger's behavior suggests human scent is present." This was significant. Search dogs were trained to give clear alerts when they detected the specific scent they were tracking. An interest indication, without a full alert, typically meant the dog sensed something relevant, but couldn't pinpoint its source, or was picking up a scent that was similar, but not identical to their target. "How is Ranger indicating interest?" Abby asked, knowing that different dogs showed different behaviors when working a challenging scent trail. "He's working the perimeter of the slide area with increased intensity, occasionally pausing to air scent, but hasn't committed to digging or giving his trained alert," Martinez replied. Abby considered this information carefully. Having worked with Ranger during training sessions, she was familiar with his patterns. "Try bringing him downwind of the slide area and approach from that direction. If the scent is being affected by the recent rainfall, he might need a cleaner air current to distinguish it properly." "Copy that. Repositioning now." Colonel Phillips raised an eyebrow at Abby. "You think they might be buried in the slide?" "It's a possibility," she acknowledged. "But Ranger's behavior suggests something more complex. If they were directly under the debris, his alert would likely be stronger and more focused. What's your theory?" Abby studied the topographical map, tracing the area where the rockslide had been reported. "The slide location correlates with the geological formation. We identified earlier, if Teller led them there to investigate, and a portion of the cliff face collapsed. She left the sentence unfinished, but her implication was clear. A rock slide could have injured one or more of the hikers or trapped them in a pocket within the debris field. Alternatively, they might have witnessed the slide and moved to a different location seeking better shelter or an alternate route back to their campsite. The radio crackled again. Base camp, Martinez here. After repositioning, Ranger has tracked to the eastern edge of the slide area. He's showing increased excitement, but still no full alert. There appears to be a narrow trail leading away from the slide toward what might be a small cave formation. We're following now. This development aligned with Abby's assessment. If the hikers had been near the rock slide when it occurred, but not directly caught in it, they might have sought shelter in a nearby cave, especially if one of them was injured. Proceed with caution, Colonel Phillips instructed. That whole area could be unstable after the rainfall and the recent slide. We're dispatching Team 3 to your location as backup. For the next 30 minutes, the command center maintained tense communication with Martinez's team as they carefully followed Ranger's lead along the narrow game trail that skirted the edge of the rockslide debris. Abby remained focused on the tactical map, mentally visualizing the terrain they were traversing based on Martinez's periodic descriptions. Base camp. We've reached what appears to be a small cave entrance partially obscured by vegetation, Martinez reported. Ranger is now giving his full alert. Repeat, full alert at cave entrance. A ripple of cautious optimism spread through the command center. A definitive alert from a search dog was highly reliable, particularly with a handler as experienced as Martinez. Can you see or hear anything from the cave entrance? Colonel Phillips asked. Negative. The opening is narrow, approximately 3 feet high by 2 feet wide. We're calling out but receiving no response. Abby took the radio. Martinez, this is Winters. What's the composition of the cave entrance? Natural formation, or possibly created by the rock slide? There was a brief pause as Martinez examined the opening more closely. Appears to be a natural limestone formation, but there's fresh debris around the entrance. The rock slide may have partially exposed it or cleared away some vegetation that previously obscured it. This matched the geological features Abby had identified on the survey map. Limestone formations often created cave systems through years of water erosion, some extending deep into hillsides or mountains. Ranger's alert suggests they went inside, Abby noted, possibly seeking shelter after witnessing the rock slide, or exploring it as part of Teller's geological interests. Martinez, prepare for cave entry, Colonel Phillips instructed. Team 3 will reach your location in approximately 15 minutes with additional technical equipment. Wait for their arrival before proceeding. Copy that, Colonel. As they waited for Team 3 to arrive with specialized cave rescue equipment, Abby's phone vibrated with another message from Dr. Bennett. This one contained no video, just a brief text. Atlas becoming more alert and responsive, attempting to stand despite sedation. Playing your recording has calming effect, but short-lived. His working instincts seem to be overriding recovery protocols. Will sedate more heavily if necessary. Abby immediately recognized the implications. Atlas was trained to push through discomfort when he sensed his handler needed him. Their bond worked both ways. Just as she felt his absence keenly, he would be experiencing the same sense of wrongness at their separation, especially while in a vulnerable state. Problem? Colonel Phillips inquired, noting her concerned expression. Atlas is fighting the recovery protocols, she explained. It's not uncommon with working dogs, especially after years of conditioning to ignore physical discomfort during missions. The colonel nodded, understanding. When my second dog, Rex, had emergency surgery for a twisted stomach, he tore out his IV twice trying to reach me. The bond doesn't recognize medical necessity. Abby quickly typed a response to Dr. Bennett. If possible, please allow a video call when convenient. Seeing and hearing me in real time rather than a recording might help him settle. His training includes specific downstay commands for injury situations that I can reinforce. While waiting for Dr. Bennett's reply, she refocused on the search operation. Team 3 had arrived at the cave entrance and was preparing specialized equipment for a confined space rescue operation. The narrow entrance would require careful navigation, and without knowing the interior conditions, they needed to prepare for multiple scenarios. We're sending in Specialist Chen with communications equipment and medical supplies, Martinez reported. Ranger is still maintaining his alert at the entrance, which suggests the subjects are inside rather than simply having passed through. Chen was the team's confined space expert, slender, experienced in spelunking, and trained in wilderness medicine. If anyone could navigate the narrow entrance safely, it would be her. "Copy that," Colonel Phillips acknowledged. "Proceed with caution and maintain constant communication." The next 20 minutes passed, with agonizing slowness, as Chen carefully made her way into the cave system, providing periodic updates on the conditions she encountered. The entrance tunnel extended approximately 30 feet before opening into a larger chamber with multiple smaller passages branching off. "I can see evidence of recent human presence," Chen reported, her voice slightly distorted by the cave's acoustics and the radio transmission. "Scuff marks in the silt. What appears to be a partial bootprint." Abby leaned forward, intensely focused on every word. The discovery of definitive human sign confirmed they were on the right track. "Any indication of which passage they might have taken?" she asked. "Working on that now," Chen replied. Wait. I hear something. Faint voices. Calling. Out now. The command center fell silent, everyone straining to hear Chen's next transmission. Seconds stretched into what felt like minutes before the radio crackled again. "Base camp! I have voice contact! Repeat, voice contact with subjects!" 3 individuals approximately 100 yards into the southwestern passage. They report minor injuries, but are unable to exit due to a secondary collapse blocking their return path. A collective sigh of relief filled the command center. Finding the missing hikers alive was the best possible outcome, especially after nearly 24 hours in potentially dangerous conditions. "What's their condition?" Colonel Phillips asked. "Melissa Morrison has a sprained ankle. Kai Jiang is reporting minor lacerations, and Ryan Teller has what appears to be a dislocated shoulder. All are conscious, oriented, and have had access to water from the cave system. They've been rationing the food they had in their day packs." "What's their account of what happened?" Abby inquired, particularly interested in understanding how experienced hikers had ended up in this situation. After a brief conversation with the hikers, Chen relayed their story. Teller discovered unusual geological samples near their campsite yesterday afternoon. After dinner, he convinced the others to accompany him to investigate what he believed might be an exposed metamorphic boundary containing rare minerals. They brought basic supplies in day packs, intending a short exploration. This confirmed Abby's theory about the undisturbed campsite. The hikers had left voluntarily on what they expected to be a brief excursion. While they were examining the rock face, the heavy rainfall triggered a small slide, Chen continued. "No one was directly hit, but they were cut off from their direct return route. Zhang spotted the cave entrance and suggested they shelter there until daylight made navigation safer. Once inside, they explored further, documenting geological features with Teller's camera. When they attempted to exit this morning, they discovered that a secondary rockfall had blocked the passage they had used to enter. It was a cascade of reasonable decisions that had led to an increasingly dangerous situation, precisely the kind of scenario that often resulted in wilderness emergencies. No single catastrophic error, but a series of small choices and unexpected environmental changes that combined to create a serious predicament. "What's the extraction plan?" Colonel Phillips asked. "The blockage is significant but appears unstable," Chen reported. "Attempting to clear it might trigger additional collapse. However, there's another passage that Zhang believes connects to a different exit point based on the airflow. We're going to attempt that route once Team 3 brings in additional lighting and medical supplies." As the rescue operation transitioned to its extraction phase, Abby's phone lit up with an incoming video call from Dr. Bennett. She stepped away from the command table, finding a quieter corner of the tent to answer. Dr. Bennett's face appeared. On screen, her expression professional but with underlying concern. "Sergeant Winters, I hope I'm not interrupting something critical." "We've located the missing hikers," Abby informed her. "They're alive with minor injuries. The extraction is being coordinated now." "That's excellent news," Dr. Bennett replied with genuine relief. "I thought you might want to see Atlas. He's been increasingly restless despite medication." The camera shifted to show Atlas in his recovery kennel. Though still clearly affected by medication, his eyes were alert, ears pricked forward at the sound of Abby's voice coming through the speaker. The sight of his familiar face, even through a screen, sent a wave of emotion through Abby that she hadn't allowed herself to feel during the intensity of the search operation. "Hey, partner," she said softly, using the specific tone reserved for their quietest moments together. "You did great today. Your job now is to rest and heal." Atlas's tail thumped weakly against the kennel bedding, a clear sign of recognition despite his groggy state. "Stay," Abby commanded firmly but gently. "Down, stay. Recovery protocol." The familiar commands triggered Atlas's training. Despite his obvious desire to respond more actively to Abby's voice, years of discipline took over. He lowered his head to the bedding, maintaining eye contact with the screen, but allowing his body to relax into the commanded position. "Good boy," Abby praised. "That's exactly right. Rest now." Dr. Bennett's impressed expression came back into view as she turned the camera toward herself. "That's remarkable. His vital signs are already stabilizing just from hearing your commands. His heart rate has decreased by almost 15 beats per minute." "Working dogs are conditioned to respond to specific commands even under extreme stress or discomfort," Abby explained. "With Atlas, we developed additional protocols for medical situations after an incident 2 years ago, when he reopened surgical stitches, trying to return to duty too quickly. I'd like to incorporate some of these commands into our treatment plan," Dr. Bennett said. "With your permission, of course. It might significantly improve his recovery process if we can use his training to encourage appropriate rest behaviors." "Absolutely," Abby agreed. "I can record specific commands for different stages of his recovery once the current operation is complete." Behind her, she heard Colonel Phillips calling her name. "I need to go," she told Dr. Bennett. "The extraction team is reporting in." "Of course," the veterinarian nodded understanding. "I'll continue monitoring Atlas and send updates." "He's in excellent hands here, Sergeant Winters. I promise you that." As Abby ended the call and returned to the command table, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. The missing hikers had been located alive. Atlas was receiving exceptional care, and despite their separation, the bond between handler and canine partner remained unbroken, a connection that transcended physical distance and would see them through this challenging time apart. As twilight descended over the North Cascade wilderness, the rescue operation entered its most critical phase. The extraction team had spent the past 2 hours carefully navigating the alternate cave passage with the 3 hikers, moving slowly to accommodate Melissa Morrison's sprained ankle and Ryan Teller's dislocated shoulder. Team leader Martinez maintained constant radio contact with the command center, providing updates on their progress through the winding limestone tunnels. "Base camp, we've reached what appears to be a secondary exit," Martinez reported. "It's narrow but passable. Visual confirmation of twilight visible through the opening. Estimate extraction to surface in approximately 15 minutes. Colonel Phillips acknowledged the transmission, then turned to Abby. "Looks like your theory about the cave system was correct. The geological survey maps didn't show this secondary exit." "The heavy rainfall probably exposed it further," Abby noted, studying the topographical overlay. "Limestone erodes relatively quickly under those conditions, especially if there was already a partial opening." Captain Delgado approached with a satellite phone. "Sergeant Winters, Dr. Bennett is calling from Pine Ridge Veterinary Clinic. She says it's important." Abby felt a spike of concern as she took the phone. Their last communication about Atlas had been reassuring, with him finally settling into recovery under the influence of her commands. A call, rather than a text message, suggested something had changed. "Dr. Bennett, is everything all right with Atlas?" "Yes and no," the veterinarian replied, her voice conveying professional concern rather than alarm. "Physically, he's recovering exactly as expected. The surgical site looks excellent, and his vital signs are strong. However, his behavioral response is unusual." "Unusual how?" Abby asked, moving to a quieter corner of the command tent. "Despite the sedation and your recorded commands, he's displaying increasing agitation, not trying to stand or move his injured leg, but whining consistently and staring at the clinic door." Dr. Bennett paused. "At first, I attributed it to normal disorientation after anesthesia, but it's been escalating over the past hour. He seems to be trying to communicate something." Abby's mind immediately flashed to similar behavior she'd observed during their years together. Atlas wasn't simply experiencing separation anxiety, he was exhibiting his trained alert response, modified by his current physical limitations. "Is he directing his attention to a specific person, or just the door in general?" she asked. "Primarily the door, but he becomes particularly vocal when I enter the recovery room," Dr. Bennett replied. "I've worked with many military and service dogs, Sergeant Winters, but I've never seen this specific pattern of behavior in a post-operative patient." Abby processed this information, connecting it to patterns she had observed in their work. Together, Atlas is trained to alert differently depending on the situation. When he can't physically lead me to what he's detecting, he uses vocalization and eye contact to communicate direction. "You think he's detecting something specific, even in a clinical environment while recovering from major surgery?" "His scent capabilities are exceptional," Abby explained. "It's why we're so effective in search operations with compromised conditions. He can identify trace particles that most dogs would miss completely." She thought for a moment, then asked, "Has anyone unusual visited the clinic today? Someone who might have been in proximity to the wilderness area where our search is taking place?" There was a brief silence as Dr. Bennett considered the question. "Not that I'm aware of, but I can check the appointment records. Do you think this could be related to your current operation?" "It's a possibility we should explore," Abby replied. "Atlas has demonstrated cross-contextual scent recognition before, identifying connections between seemingly unrelated situations, based on scent similarities." "I'll review today's patient list and call you back," Dr. Bennett promised. "In the meantime, I'll have my staff record his behavior for your assessment." As Abby ended the call, Colonel Phillips approached with an update. "The extraction team has successfully brought all 3 hikers to the surface. Medical evaluation indicates no life-threatening injuries. Air transport is being arranged to take them to Cascade Regional Hospital for further assessment." This was excellent news, But Abby found her thoughts divided between the successful rescue and Atlas's unusual behavior. Her years of experience had taught her to trust her partner's instincts, even when they seemed inexplicable by conventional standards. "Colonel, did the hikers provide any additional information about why they were exploring that specific area?" she asked. According to Martinez, Teller discovered unusual mineral deposits that he believed might be evidence of previously undocumented geological activity in the region. Something about anomalous schist formations that contradicted existing survey data. This detail caught Abby's attention immediately. Schist formations, similar to the rock fragment we found embedded in Atlas's leg from the Craggy Peak rock slide? The Colonel's expression sharpened with interest. "Potentially. Why? Do you see a connection?" Before Abby could elaborate, her satellite phone rang. Again. Dr. Bennett was calling back sooner than expected. "Sergeant Winters, I've reviewed today's appointment records," the veterinarian said without preamble. "There's something you should know. This morning, shortly before you arrived, we treated a research scientist from the Geological Survey Department, Dr. Victor Harmon. He brought in his border collie for a routine vaccination." The name registered immediately. Dr. Harmon was the lead scientist who declared Craggy Peak safe for hikers after the initial instability reports last month, Abby recalled. His assessment is why the trails were reopened despite concerns from some of the ranger teams. "That may explain Atlas's reaction," Dr. Bennett suggested. "If Dr. Harmon carried scent particles from the same geological formation that injured Atlas during the rock slide." Abby's mind raced, connecting seemingly disparate elements into a coherent picture. "Dr. Bennett, was Harmon carrying any equipment or samples when he visited the clinic?" "Yes, actually. He mentioned he was heading to a field site directly after the appointment. He had what looked like collection cases and technical equipment in his vehicle." This confirmation strengthened Abby's emerging theory. She thanked Dr. Bennett and promised to call back about Atlas soon, then immediately rejoined Colonel Phillips at the command table. "Sir, I believe there may be a significant connection between today's rescue, Atlas's injury from the Craggy Peak rockslide, and Dr. Victor Harmon from the Geological Survey Department." The colonel listened intently as Abby outlined her theory, connecting Atlas's unusual behavior at the clinic with the geological samples found at the hikers' campsite and Dr. Harmon's involvement in both areas. "You're suggesting that Teller may have discovered evidence contradicting Harmon's safety assessment of the region?" he asked when she finished. "It's a working theory," Abby acknowledged, "but it would explain why experienced hikers would leave their camp to explore a geological formation in deteriorating weather conditions. If Teller recognized something significant in his samples, something that contradicted official reports." Captain Delgado joined them, adding another piece to the puzzle. "The extraction team just reported that Teller had his camera with him throughout the ordeal. He says he has extensive documentation of the unusual formations they found, including GPS coordinates and comparison samples." Colonel Phillips' expression turned grave. "If there's evidence that Dr. Harmon knowingly falsified safety reports about geological stability in the region, it would explain his presence in the area today," Abby concluded, "and possibly why Atlas is reacting so strongly to his scent at the clinic. Working dogs often form negative associations with scents connected to traumatic experiences." This realization prompted immediate action. Colonel Phillips contacted regional headquarters to request a formal investigation into Dr. Harmon's geological assessments and his current whereabouts. Captain Delgado arranged for Teller's photographic evidence to be secured and evaluated by independent experts. As these measures were implemented, Martinez radioed from the medical evacuation site with an unexpected update. "Base camp, be advised. Ryan Teller is requesting to speak with the search coordinator immediately. He says it's urgent and related to potential public safety concerns in the region. Colonel Phillips looked to Abby. You've earned the right to hear this directly. Take the helicopter to the evac site. 20 minutes later, Abby sat across from Ryan Teller in the medical treatment tent. Despite his injured shoulder now immobilized in a sling, the young geology student appeared animated and determined, his laptop open beside him displaying photographic evidence and data readings. Sergeant Winters, thank you for coordinating our rescue, he began earnestly, but there's something critically important you need to see. He navigated to a folder containing dozens of high-resolution photographs of rock formations, soil samples, and GPS-tagged locations. 3 weeks ago, I was analyzing core samples from the eastern slope of Craggy Peak as part of my senior research project. I discovered evidence of significant instability that contradicted the official Geological Survey assessment. Teller flicked through to a comparison chart. This shows the composition of samples I collected versus those cited in Dr. Harmon's safety report. The differences are statistically impossible if they're supposedly from the same location. Abby studied the technical data which, while outside her expertise, clearly showed substantial discrepancies. You're suggesting Dr. Harmon falsified his reports? Not just suggesting it, proving it, Teller asserted. When I attempted to submit my findings through official channels, my report was buried. My academic advisor suggested I collect more conclusive evidence before making such serious allegations against a respected scientist. He navigated to another screen, showing a map of the region with multiple tagged locations. That's why we came out here. Melissa's father, Senator Morrison, has been advocating for increased funding for wilderness safety assessments. She believed he could help once we had irrefutable evidence. And the cave exploration wasn't just geological curiosity, Abby surmised. No, Teller confirmed. The formation we discovered contained the same anomalous schist patterns I found at Craggy Peak. Evidence of a connected fault line that doesn't appear on any official surveys. It suggests a much larger instability zone than what's currently acknowledged. He paused, his expression turning grave. If I'm right, several popular hiking trails currently deemed safe are actually at high risk for catastrophic rock slides, especially after heavy rainfall like we just experienced. The implications were sobering. Harmon's falsified reports had already contributed to Atlas's injury during the Marston rescue on Craggy Peak. Without intervention, they could lead to far more tragic consequences for unsuspecting hikers throughout the region. We need to get this information to the appropriate authorities immediately, Abby decided, and implement emergency closures of the affected trails until a thorough reassessment can be conducted. As they prepared to transport this critical evidence to regional headquarters, Abby's satellite phone rang again. Dr. Bennett's name flashed on the screen. Sergeant Winters, something's happening here that you should know about, the veterinarian said, her voice tense but controlled. Dr. Harmon just returned to the clinic, asking to speak with me about a confidential matter regarding search and rescue operations. He specifically mentioned your name and Atlas. Abby felt a cold certainty settle in her chest. Is he still there? Yes, I told him I needed to complete a procedure first to buy some time. He's waiting in my office. Don't confront him, Abby instructed, but don't let him near Atlas either. We have reason to believe he may be involved in falsifying geological safety reports that put multiple lives at risk, including during the incident that injured Atlas. I understand, Dr. Bennett replied, her professional composure unshaken by this revelation. What would you like me to do? Stall him if possible. Local authorities are being notified. I'll contact you once they're en route to the clinic. After ending the call, Abby quickly briefed Colonel Phillips on this new development. With characteristic efficiency, he contacted the Pine Ridge Sheriff's Department to coordinate Harmon's detention for questioning while evidence was secured. "You should return to Pine Ridge immediately," the colonel told Abby, "not just for Atlas's protection, but because you're now a key witness connecting multiple aspects of this case." Within minutes, Abby was aboard the helicopter heading back to Pine Ridge, the significance of the day's events still unfolding in her mind. What had begun as a routine veterinary appointment for Atlas had unexpectedly led to the discovery of scientific fraud with life-threatening implications. Once again, her canine partner's extraordinary instincts had detected connections that humans had missed entirely. The helicopter touched down at Pine Ridge Municipal Airport as evening settled over the small town. A sheriff's department vehicle was waiting to transport Abby directly to the veterinary clinic, where deputies had already arrived to question Dr. Harmon. When Abby entered the clinic, the atmosphere was markedly different from her first visit that morning. The reception area was empty of clients, with only law enforcement personnel and clinic staff present. Dr. Bennett met her at the door, her expression reflecting both relief and residual tension. "They've taken Dr. Harmon to the station for questioning," she informed Abby. When the deputies arrived, he attempted to delete files from his tablet, but they secured it before he could complete the process. "Was he able to access any of Atlas's medical records?" Abby asked, concerned about potential interference with evidence. "No, I ensured all records were secure once I recognized the potential connection." Dr. Bennett led Abby toward the recovery area. "Atlas has been increasingly alert since Harmon arrived. His behavior changed dramatically, from general agitation to focused alerting. It was remarkable to witness his training override his physical condition." As they entered the recovery room, Atlas immediately raised his head, ears forward, and eyes bright with recognition, despite the lingering effects of sedation and pain medication. His tail thumped steadily against the bedding, a controlled expression of joy that respected his body's limitations while conveying his happiness at Abby's return. "Hey, partner," Abby said softly, kneeling beside his kennel and gently placing her hand where he could sniff it. "You did good work today, really good work." Atlas leaned into her touch, a soft whine expressing what seemed like both relief and vindication. Dr. Bennett watched this reunion with professional interest and personal emotion. "In 20 years of veterinary practice, I've never seen anything quite like this," she admitted. His ability to detect and communicate a potential threat while recovering from major surgery defies conventional understanding of canine cognition. "It's not just training," Abby explained, maintaining the gentle contact that was comforting both her and Atlas. "It's trust and purpose. Atlas doesn't separate work from life the way humans do, protecting people, finding those who are lost. It's integral to his identity, not just a job he performs." Dr. Bennett nodded thoughtfully. "That perspective changes how we should approach his recovery. Traditional protocols assume patients should be completely disconnected from normal activities, but for Atlas, his psychological well-being is connected to his sense of purpose." Abby completed the thought, "finding ways to maintain that while supporting physical healing will be crucial." "I have some ideas about that," Dr. Bennett offered. "Modifications to his rehabilitation plan that would incorporate elements of his training while respecting medical requirements." As they discussed these specialized recovery strategies, Sheriff Elena Diaz entered the room, her expression suggesting significant developments. "Sergeant Winters, Dr. Bennett," she greeted them professionally. "I wanted to update you personally. Dr. Harmon has been formally detained pending a federal investigation. The preliminary examination of his tablet revealed extensive correspondence, suggesting he knowingly falsified geological stability reports for multiple wilderness areas. "Any indication why?" Abby asked. "The evidence points to financial motivations," Sheriff Diaz explained. "A development company had options to purchase land adjacent to the wilderness areas, contingent on those areas remaining open for recreational use. If the trails had been closed due to safety concerns, the land would have lost significant value," Abby concluded, and Harmon was receiving compensation to ensure that didn't happen. "Precisely. We're coordinating with federal agencies. Now, since this crosses into potential environmental crimes on protected lands." The sheriff's gaze moved to Atlas, her expression softening slightly. "Your partner there deserves a commendation. If this conspiracy hadn't been uncovered, we could have been looking at multiple casualties once hiking season peaks next month." After Sheriff Diaz departed, Abby remained beside Atlas, processing the extraordinary sequence of events that had unfolded from what should have been a routine veterinary appointment. Dr. Bennett gave them space, attending to other responsibilities, while ensuring they had privacy for their reunion. "You knew," Abby said quietly to Atlas, whose attentive eyes hadn't left her face. "You recognized his scent from Craggy Peak and made the connection when no one else could." Atlas blinked slowly in response, the canine equivalent of acknowledgement. His working life had been built around interpreting scent information that humans couldn't detect, creating mental maps of connections invisible to everyone except him. Dr. Bennett returned a short while later, carrying a tablet with Atlas's updated medical information. His latest vitals are excellent, especially considering the stressful events of the day. The surgical site is showing ideal initial healing, and he's maintaining appropriate respiration and heart rate, despite being more alert than we'd typically expect at this stage. "When can he come home?" Abby asked. "I'd like to keep him under observation until tomorrow afternoon," Dr. Bennett replied. "Not because I'm concerned about complications, but to ensure we have a comprehensive baseline for his home recovery plan. Speaking of which," she handed Abby a detailed document outlining Atlas's rehabilitation protocol, "I've modified our standard approach to incorporate elements of his training. Instead of just rest, we're framing it as strategic recovery. Deployment with specific missions he can accomplish while maintaining necessary physical restrictions." Abby scanned the innovative plan with growing appreciation. Rather than fighting Atlas's working dog instincts, Dr. Bennett had designed a recovery process that channeled those instincts productively. Each phase of healing was framed as a mission with specific objectives and successful completion criteria. "This is excellent," Abby acknowledged. "It addresses both the physical and psychological aspects of his recovery." After witnessing his performance today, I realized that conventional approaches would be counterproductive, Dr. Bennett explained. "Atlas isn't just a pet recovering from surgery. He's a highly trained professional temporarily sidelined from duties he considers essential to his purpose." She hesitated, then added, "I owe both of you an apology. When you first arrived, this morning I saw what I expected to see, just another client, not the exceptional team you actually are. If I hadn't been so dismissive initially, we might not have uncovered Harmon's fraud," Abby completed the thought. "Sometimes underestimation creates opportunities that recognition would prevent." Dr. Bennett smiled at this perspective. "A generous interpretation. Nevertheless, I've learned an important lesson about looking beyond surface appearances." As evening deepened into night, Abby remained at Atlas's side, the clinic staff providing her with a reclining chair that allowed her to stay comfortable while maintaining contact with her partner. Dr. Bennett arranged to have dinner delivered for her, refusing any payment and insisting it was the least she could do under the circumstances. During a quiet moment as Atlas dozed peacefully under the influence of his evening medication, Abby's phone rang. Colonel Phillips was calling with additional updates. "Teller's evidence has been validated by independent experts," he informed her. "Emergency closures are being implemented for all potentially affected trails, and a comprehensive geological reassessment is being organized. Senator Morrison is personally overseeing the investigation into how Harmon's falsified reports were accepted without proper verification." "That's excellent news, sir. How's our hero doing?" the colonel asked, his gruff voice softening slightly. "Resting comfortably. Dr. Bennett has been exceptional, not just her surgical skills, but her understanding of Atlas's unique needs as a working dog." "Good. You both deserve the best care available." There was a brief pause before he continued. "The Forest Service Director has authorized 2 weeks of administrative leave for you, effective immediately. He specifically mentioned that your time should be devoted to ensuring the complete recovery of a valuable team asset, by which he means making sure Atlas heals properly." This was an unexpected but welcome development. Typically, handlers were given minimal time off when their K9 partners were injured, expected to work with other teams or on administrative duties during the recovery period. "Please convey my appreciation to the director," Abby replied. "This will make a significant difference in Atlas's recovery process." "Already done. And Winters?" The director also mentioned something about a commendation ceremony once Atlas is back on his feet. Apparently, Senator Morrison is quite interested in recognizing the team that saved his daughter and uncovered a conspiracy that threatened public safety. After the call ended, Abby shared this news with Atlas, who had awakened and was listening with characteristic attentiveness. "Hear that, partner? We're getting 2 weeks together for your recovery, and apparently there's a commendation in our future." Atlas's expression remained stoic, but his tail offered a single thump against the bedding, his typical response to recognition that neither sought nor rejected such honors. Like Abby, he performed his duties not for accolades, but because the work itself mattered. Dr. Bennett returned for a final check before turning night duties over to her staff. "Everything looks excellent," she confirmed, after examining Atlas's surgical site and reviewing his latest vitals. "I've arranged for a cot to be brought in, so you can be more comfortable overnight. The recovery room will be yours exclusively until Atlas is discharged." "That's incredibly generous," Abby said. "Thank you for everything you've done today, not just the surgical care, but your intuition about Atlas's behavior and your willingness to act on it." The veterinarian nodded acknowledgement. "Today has been educational. When I opened this clinic, I had a vision of providing exceptional veterinary care to the community. Somewhere along the way, that vision narrowed to focus on efficiency and appearances rather than the core mission of helping animals and the people who care for them." She glanced around the recovery room with a critical eye. "The fancy equipment and designer furniture don't matter if we're turning away animals in need or failing to recognize the special bonds between working dogs and their handlers." "What will you do now?" Abby asked, sensing a shift in the veterinarian's perspective that went beyond their immediate situation. "Implement some overdue changes," Dr. Bennett replied decisively, "starting with a revision of our emergency care policies and the establishment of a dedicated fund for animals whose owners can't afford treatment. My parents raised me to believe that compassion should never be contingent on someone's ability to pay." This commitment to positive change was perhaps the most meaningful outcome of the day's dramatic events. Beyond the rescue of the missing hikers and the exposure of Harmon's dangerous fraud, a healing practice was being restored to its original purpose. As night settled fully over Pine Ridge, Abby stretched out on the cot beside Atlas's recovery kennel, her hand resting gently on his flank so he could feel her presence even in sleep. The events of the day replayed in her mind, from the initial dismissal at the clinic to the successful rescue operation and the unexpected uncovering of scientific misconduct with potentially deadly consequences. Through it all, the constant had been the extraordinary bond between Handler and K9, a partnership built on mutual trust, respect, and an unwavering commitment to serving others. Even separated by miles and compromised by injury, their connection had remained intact, strong enough to bridge the distance and communicate vital information when it mattered most. As Atlas's breathing deepened into the rhythm of healing sleep, Abby felt profound gratitude for this partnership that transcended conventional understanding. What had begun as a routine veterinary appointment had revealed deeper truths about appearance versus reality, about judgments made too quickly, and about the remarkable capacity of animals and humans to form bonds that could quite literally save lives. Tomorrow would bring new challenges in Atlas's recovery journey, but tonight, in the quiet of the recovery room, all was well. Handler and K9 reunited and on the path to healing, both the physical injuries from the rock slide and the momentary wound of being judged unworthy of care based on appearances alone. Dr. Bennett had learned an invaluable lesson about looking beyond surface impressions. Harmon had discovered the consequences of placing profit above safety and integrity, and Abby had been reminded once again that her unassuming appearance, so often leading to underestimation, could sometimes be the greatest asset in uncovering truth and serving justice. As sleep began to claim her, Abby's last conscious thought was a reflection on the day's journey, from rejection to recognition, from separation to reunion, from potential tragedy to unexpected triumph. Every mission with Atlas taught her something new, and today's lesson was perhaps the most profound yet. True value isn't found in appearances or accolades, but in the quiet, consistent choice to serve with integrity, even when no one is watching. Or perhaps especially then. Morning light filtered through the blinds of Pine Ridge Veterinary Clinic's recovery room, casting gentle patterns across the polished floor. Abby awoke to find Atlas already alert, his intelligent eyes following her movements as she stretched the stiffness from her shoulders after a night on the clinic's cot. Despite the lingering effects of anesthesia and pain medication, his ears perked forward with characteristic attentiveness, and his tail offered a measured thump of greeting. "Good morning, partner," Abby said softly, moving to kneel beside his kennel. "How are we doing today?" As if understanding the question perfectly, Atlas shifted slightly to allow her a better view of his surgical site, a behavior they had established during previous injuries. This simple action, this trust in her assessment, tightened Abby's throat with emotion. Even compromised by surgery and medication, Atlas maintained their working protocols and the seamless communication they had built over years of service together. A gentle knock at the door announced Dr. Bennett's arrival for morning rounds. The veterinarian entered with a quiet efficiency that respected the bond she was witnessing, her clinical assessment tempered by newfound understanding of the exceptional partnership before her. "He had an excellent night," Dr. Bennett reported, reviewing the monitoring charts before approaching Atlas. "Stable vitals throughout, appropriate pain responses, and minimal restlessness. The night staff noted he seemed more settled after your arrival." She performed a careful examination of the surgical site, her movements precise and gentle. The incision looks textbook perfect, minimal swelling, no signs of infection, and the drain is functioning exactly as intended. She looked up at Abby with genuine admiration. "His underlying physical condition is remarkable. Most dogs would show significantly more inflammation at this stage." "We maintain a rigorous fitness regimen," Abby explained. "Specialized nutrition, targeted strength training, and recovery protocols, even when he's not injured." In our line of work, physical conditioning can mean the difference between success and failure. Dr. Bennett nodded thoughtfully. It certainly gives him an advantage in recovery. Based on what I'm seeing, I'm confident we can proceed with the accelerated rehabilitation plan we discussed last night. She produced a tablet displaying a detailed schedule for Atlas's recovery, a comprehensive program that incorporated elements of his search and rescue training into appropriate physical therapy exercises. I've structured the plan in 3 phases, Dr. Bennett explained. The first week focuses on controlled rest with mental stimulation exercises that won't compromise the surgical site. Weeks 2 and 3 introduce graduated mobility training using modified versions of his working commands. By week 4, we should be able to begin limited field exercises, carefully monitored for any signs of stress on the joint. Abby reviewed the plan with the practiced eye of someone accustomed to analyzing complex operational protocols. This is impressively thorough. You've incorporated most of our standard training terminology. I did some research last night, Dr. Bennett admitted. The Forest Service has published several papers on rehabilitation protocols for working dogs. I adapted their framework to Atlas's specific needs based on the surgery we performed. This level of personalized care, going beyond standard veterinary practice to incorporate specialized knowledge of working dog psychology, represented a significant shift from their initial reception at the clinic. Yesterday morning, Atlas had been viewed as just another patient. Today, he was recognized as the professional he truly was, deserving of care tailored to his unique role and capabilities. "What's the plan for today?" Abby asked. "If his morning blood work confirms what I'm seeing clinically, we can discharge him this afternoon," Dr. Bennett replied. "I'd like to demonstrate the first phase of exercises before you leave, and we'll schedule follow-up appointments every 3 days initially to monitor his progress." She hesitated, then added, "I've also made arrangements for a house call option, if transportation becomes problematic at any point. Given Atlas's role in uncovering Dr. Harmon's fraud, I consider his recovery a priority for this practice." As Dr. Bennett completed her examination and left to check Atlas's blood work, Abby received a call from Colonel Phillips, updating her on developments in the Harmon investigation. Federal agents executed search warrants at Harmon's office and residence this morning, he reported. They've discovered evidence of a broader conspiracy involving multiple falsified geological safety reports across 3 states. The development company that was paying him has also been raided. "Any indication of how many sites have been compromised?" Abby asked, concerned about potential public safety implications. "At least 7 major wilderness areas with high visitor traffic," the colonel replied grimly. "All have been temporarily closed, pending comprehensive safety assessments by independent experts. Senator Morrison is personally overseeing the investigation, given his daughter's involvement in exposing the situation." "And the hikers? How are they doing?" "All 3 have been released from the hospital with minor injuries. Teller has been asked to consult with the federal investigation team, given his expertise with the geological formations in question." Phillips paused, then added with uncharacteristic warmth, "The senator specifically asked me to convey his personal gratitude to you and Atlas. His daughter told him how you coordinated the search operation, even while concerned about your partner's surgery." After the call ended, Abby shared this update with Atlas, maintaining their practice of mutual briefing regardless of circumstances. His alert posture and focused gaze indicated complete comprehension, reinforcing Dr. Bennett's assessment that his cognitive function remained unaffected by surgery and medication. "Looks like we stumbled into something much bigger than we realized, partner," Abby told him. "What started as a routine veterinary appointment somehow exposed a multi-state conspiracy that could have cost countless lives. Atlas blinked slowly in acknowledgement, his calm acceptance of extraordinary circumstances reflecting the nature of their work, where ordinary days frequently transformed into exceptional challenges. Mid-morning brought another visitor to the recovery room, Mrs. Reeves, the woman whose terrier Rusty had been denied treatment until Abby's intervention. She entered tentatively, as if uncertain of her welcome, but her expression brightened upon seeing Abby. "Sergeant Winters, Dr. Bennett told me I might find you here." She carried a small basket covered with a checkered cloth. "I wanted to thank you properly for what you did yesterday. Rusty is home now and doing wonderfully. The mushroom toxins are completely out of his system." She placed the basket on a nearby table, removing the cloth to reveal homemade muffins and a thermos. "I thought you might appreciate something other than hospital food while you're here with your partner." The gesture, simple yet profoundly thoughtful, exemplified the ripple effects of compassion that Abby had witnessed throughout her career. One act of kindness frequently inspired, others creating connections where none had existed before. "That's incredibly kind of you," Abby said sincerely. "How is Rusty adjusting to being home?" Mrs. Reeves smiled warmly. "Like nothing ever happened. He's already chasing squirrels in the backyard, though I'm watching him much more carefully. Now that I know about those mushrooms." She approached Atlas's kennel cautiously, respectful of his space. "And how is your brave partner doing?" Dr. Bennett explained he had surgery for an injury sustained during a rescue operation. "He's recovering well," Abby replied. "We should be able to go home this afternoon." Mrs. Reeves nodded approvingly. "Dr. Bennett seems like a completely different person today. When I brought Rusty in for his follow-up this morning, the entire staff was attentive and compassionate, not just to me, but to everyone in the waiting room. There's even a new sign about emergency care protocols." This information piqued Abby's interest. A new sign. "Yes, explaining that no animal in a distress will be turned away regardless of the owner's financial situation. Apparently, the clinic has established an emergency care fund to cover treatments for people who can't afford to pay immediately." Mrs. Reeves smiled. "The receptionist, Heather, I believe, told me it was inspired by your actions yesterday." After Mrs. Reeves departed, Abby found herself reflecting on the profound changes catalyzed by their initially challenging visit to the clinic. What had begun as a simple referral for orthopedic surgery had transformed not only the clinic's policies, but potentially its fundamental approach to veterinary care in the community. Dr. Bennett returned with Atlas's blood work results, confirming he was ready for discharge. "Everything looks excellent," she reported. "His inflammatory markers are lower than expected at this stage, and his organ function parameters are completely normal despite the anesthesia and medications." She proceeded to demonstrate the first phase of rehabilitation exercises, mental stimulation activities that would keep Atlas engaged without compromising his physical recovery. These included modified scent detection games using specially designed containers that could be manipulated without standing, and cognitive challenges that incorporated his working vocabulary in non-physical contexts. "The goal is to maintain his psychological well-being while his body heals," Dr. Bennett explained. "Working dogs often experience significant stress when prevented from performing their duties. These exercises provide appropriate stimulation while reinforcing that rest is currently his primary mission." By early afternoon, all discharge preparations were complete. Atlas had been fitted with a specialized protective vest that supported his surgical site while preventing him from interfering with the incision. A custom-designed mobility harness allowed Abby to provide stability assistance without putting pressure on his injured leg. All medications were organized with detailed administration instructions and potential side effects to monitor. As they prepared to leave, Dr. Bennett handed Abby a comprehensive binder containing Atlas's complete medical records, rehabilitation plan, and contact information for emergency support at any hour. "I've included my personal cell phone number," she said. "Day or night, if you have any concerns about his recovery, please don't hesitate to call." The clinic's front doors opened automatically as they approached, revealing an unexpected scene in the parking lot. A small gathering of people stood beside Abby's Forest Service vehicle. Colonel Phillips, Captain Delgado, Mrs. Reeves with Rusty on a leash, and several other community members Abby didn't immediately recognize. "What's all this?" she asked. Surprised by the impromptu reception, Colonel Phillips stepped forward, his usually stern expression softened by what might almost be called a smile. "Word travels fast in small towns, Winters. When people heard Atlas was being discharged today, they wanted to show their support." Captain Delgado added, "The story about how Atlas identified Dr. Harmon's connection to the geological fraud has already spread through the Ranger Service. Some of the local teams wanted to be here to welcome him home." Mrs. Reeves gestured to the others assembled nearby. "And these are some of my neighbors who've brought their pets to this clinic over the years. When they heard what happened with Rusty and how your intervention led to changes in the emergency care policy, they wanted to express their gratitude. This spontaneous gathering, this community recognition of Atlas's value without any official ceremony or formal acknowledgement, touched Abby deeply. Throughout their years of service, she and Atlas had conducted countless rescues, received numerous commendations, and even occasionally made headlines for particularly dramatic operations. But this quiet assembly of community members, offering nothing more than their presence and appreciation, somehow meant more than all the official accolades combined. Dr. Bennett observed this scene from the clinic doorway, her expression reflecting both professional satisfaction and personal emotion. The transformation in her demeanor since their first encounter was remarkable, from clinical detachment to genuine investment in Atlas's recovery and the broader impact of their visit to her practice. With Colonel Phillips's assistance, Atlas was carefully loaded into the specially prepared space in Abby's vehicle. Despite his injury and medication, he maintained his dignified bearing, acknowledging the assembled supporters with alert attention that reflected his undiminished spirit and professionalism. As Abby prepared to depart, Dr. Bennett approached for a final word. "I've been practicing veterinary medicine for 15 years, she said quietly, "but I've learned more about what it truly means to provide care in the past 24 hours than in all those years combined. Thank you for that lesson, even if it began with my failure to see what was right in front of me. Sometimes the most valuable insights come from our most uncomfortable moments," Abby replied. "Atlas and I have certainly learned that lesson repeatedly in our work together." The drive to Abby's cabin on the outskirts of Pine Ridge took approximately 30 minutes, a journey she navigated with exceptional care, avoiding rough patches in the road and taking turns with glacial slowness to prevent any unnecessary movement that might stress Atlas's surgical site. Throughout the trip, he remained calmly alert in his modified transport space, occasionally making eye contact through the rearview mirror in their habitual check-in pattern. The cabin came into view as they crested the final hill, a modest structure of weathered cedar and stone that blended harmoniously with the surrounding forest. Unlike many of her colleagues who lived in town for convenience, Abby had deliberately chosen this remote location for its tranquility and the training opportunities provided by the varied wilderness terrain surrounding it. As she helped Atlas navigate the gentle ramp she had installed for precisely this type of situation, Abby felt the familiar sense of rightness that always accompanied their return home after difficult operations. The cabin represented more than shelter. It was the physical embodiment of their partnership, designed with both human and canine needs given equal consideration, a space where they could fully be themselves away from operational demands and public expectations. Inside, specially designed features reflected Atlas's equal status in their household. Elevated feeding stations positioned to minimize strain on joints, custom sleeping platforms at varying heights to accommodate different physical conditions, and strategically placed windows at both human and canine eye levels to allow mutual monitoring of their surroundings. Abby settled Atlas onto his recovery bed, a specialized orthopedic platform positioned to provide optimal views of both the main living area and the forest beyond the large picture window. She arranged his monitoring devices within easy reach and organized his medications on the nearby counter, creating an efficient home treatment station. "Home base established," she told him, using their operational terminology to reinforce that this recovery period was a mission rather than an interruption of their work together. Phase 1 protocols initiated. Atlas responded with a soft exhale and deliberate settling of his body onto the supportive surface, his way of acknowledging the command and accepting the parameters of their current assignment. Even in recovery, their communication maintained the precision and mutual understanding that characterized their professional interactions. As evening approached, Abby prepared dinner for both of them, her own simple meal and Atlas's specially formulated recovery nutrition designed to provide optimal support for tissue healing and inflammation reduction. The ritual of shared mealtime maintained normalcy within their altered circumstances, another thread of continuity in a situation defined by necessary adaptation. After administering Atlas's evening medications and completing his first set of prescribed mental stimulation exercises, Abby settled into the armchair positioned beside his recovery platform. This arrangement allowed them to maintain physical proximity and visual connection while respecting the spatial requirements of his healing process. "Quite a couple of days, partner," she reflected aloud, knowing that vocalization of her thoughts helped Atlas remain engaged even when physical activity was restricted, from being turned away at a clinic door to uncovering a multi-state conspiracy that could have cost countless lives. Not our typical veterinary appointment. Atlas's ears twitched attentively, his gaze steady as he processed her words. Their years together had created a depth of understanding that transcended conventional human-animal communication. A partnership forged through shared challenges, mutual dependence, and absolute trust in each other's capabilities. As darkness settled over the forest surrounding their cabin, Abby's phone chimed with an incoming message from Dr. Bennett. "Just checking in on our patient. How is he settling at home? Any concerns with the initial medication doses?" The professional inquiry was followed by a more personal note. "I wanted you to know that we had an emergency case this evening. A stray dog brought in with severe injuries after being struck by a vehicle. No owner, no identification, no way to pay for care. Thanks to our new emergency protocol inspired by your visit yesterday, we provided full treatment without hesitation. The dog is now stable and resting comfortably with an excellent prognosis for recovery. Sometimes transformative change begins with a single challenging interaction. For what it's worth, I'm grateful for the difficult lesson you and Atlas provided. It has already saved a life." This tangible evidence of positive impact, of meaningful change resulting from their difficult experience at the clinic, brought a sense of purpose to the challenges they had faced. Their work typically involved direct intervention in life-threatening situations, but this was something different, systemic change that would benefit countless animals and people they would never meet. Abby shared the message with Atlas, maintaining their practice of mutual information exchange regardless of circumstances. His response, A subtle shift in posture and focused attention indicated his comprehension of the significance beyond their personal situation. "Ripples in the pond, partner," Abby observed. "Sometimes the most important rescues aren't the ones that make headlines." The following morning established their recovery routine: medication administration, gentle range of motion exercises, under the limits prescribed by Dr. Bennett, mental stimulation activities that incorporated Atlas's professional skills within his physical restrictions, and regular communication with the rehabilitation team monitoring his progress. Mid-morning brought an unexpected visitor, Colonel Phillips, arriving not in his official capacity but as a fellow K9 handler who understood the unique challenges of supporting a working dog through recovery. "Thought you might appreciate some company," he said, presenting a package of Atlas's favorite approved training treats, organic, specially formulated rewards used during their most demanding search operations, and some intelligence from headquarters. He settled into a chair, positioned to allow Atlas to observe him without strain, respecting the working dog's need to maintain environmental awareness even while physically compromised. "Harmon's case is expanding," Phillips reported. "Federal investigators have identified at least 3 other geological analysts involved in falsifying safety reports across multiple states, all connected to the same development company that was paying Harmon. Potentially catastrophic consequences," Abby noted, thinking of the rock slide that had injured Atlas and the even larger one that had trapped the 3 hikers in the cave. "Precisely. The scope of the fraud is still being determined, but preliminary assessments suggest at least 15 wilderness areas may have been compromised." The colonel's expression was grave. If these falsified reports hadn't been exposed... He didn't need to complete the thought. Both understood the potential tragedy that had been averted through the seemingly random connection of events. Atlas's injury, their referral to Dr. Bennett's clinic, Harmon's coincidental presence there, and Atlas's extraordinary ability to recognize and alert to the significant scent association. "There's more," Phillips continued. "Senator Morrison is proposing legislation to strengthen oversight of geological safety assessments in protected wilderness areas. He's calling it the Atlas Protocol, a system of mandatory independent verification for any report affecting public access to potentially hazardous natural environments." This announcement, this recognition of Atlas's contribution at the highest levels of government, brought a swell of pride that Abby didn't bother to disguise. Unlike commendations for dramatic rescues, this legislative proposal represented something more fundamental: systemic change that would protect countless unseen future visitors to wilderness areas. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories, right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.